misinformation, instability, the global health economic crisis. Put them all together and you get widespread mistrust. Remember those words, widespread mistrust in the world's institutions. Every time at this time, normally up the mountain in Davos, we talk about Edelman's trust barometer. It's a stalwart of our Januaries. Now it's reached the point where businesses are trusted more than NGOs, government and, perhaps not surprisingly, the media. Isolate the last 8 months and all 4 categories are down. Richard Edelman is the chief executive of Edelman. He's with me now. Richard, I'm sorry we're not up a mountain freezing ourselves off as we try and discuss this. But when I look at this, and I mean, trust in everybody is down. Should we be surprised?
So we had a peak in trust in May. When it seemed that government was going to be able to solve the COVID crisis. It was like World War II, and we relied on the big government. And what's happened in the subsequent months is deep disappointment. So government trust has declined. Business declined a little bit, but more or less, business is the clear water favorite at the moment. And that's because they've delivered the vaccines. They've also gotten people back to work safely. And the next months, particularly as there's a new administration in the States and there's a lot of toing and froing about who's going to get vaccines among government, business is going to be left to its own devices on a lot of these issues. And it's the time for CEOs to stand up, speak up, and be heard.
Okay, so what's the cost to it all? I don't mean money-wise. If we have, trust, you and I have been talking about the trust barometer for a good while, and trust always seems to ebb and flow, and some are up and some are down. Admittedly, government, it tends to be always more and not on the downside at times. But what's the real effect of us losing trust?
I think it has a major effect on employees. You're not going to get the best and brightest to work for your companies unless they trust what you're doing. And also, Richard, it has a now effect on consumers. They're just not going to buy your brands. The key moment is that trust is moved local. It's in my employer, my CEO, even in my company's publication, more than in mainstream media. So there's a desperate request for quality information from my company. And that's a big new mandate for business. The business itself, and on this program, we frequently talk about the CEO as the moral barometer. Do you think that rubric still stands? Do you think that CEOs and businesses, they performed well in the early parts of the pandemic, but now as we move into this much more difficult part, do you think that holds? Well, for example, this week, Alan Jope of Unilever unveiled a plan in which he called for a living wage, not just across Unilever's vast number of employees, but the entire supply chain and retail network. And so it's going to affect 3 million employees around the world. That's the next step for business, to get involved in upskilling, fair wages, and also the sustainability challenges beyond vaccine.
But as you look at your clients, the one thing we know is we can use the word accelerate. Everything's been accelerated. Our use of technology accelerated. Our work from home, the way we interact with each other. Everything has been accelerated. Where do you see with your clients that acceleration moving next? Because I can see an argument that says people do go back into the workplace. People do sort of retreat back from where they were.
I think on systemic racism, for example, business is really taking the ball. Example is Yum Brands, where they've got a fund now. If there's an African-American or Hispanic who's running a restaurant and he wants to or she wants to apply for a franchise, Yum will put up the capital and have it matched with a bank loan so that that person can become a franchisee. That's a major change in the ecosystem. And it really changes how an individual feels he or she can be treated if you're diverse. Those sorts of things, business must be on offense. It's time for action, not just communications.
You see, I worry about that. I think business is very good at talking a good talk. And, you know, as long as we talked about this last night on this program, as long as the bottom line holds up, they're happy to do the right thing. Although Brian Moynihan, who you'll know very well from Bank of America, said when it comes to the ESGs on this program, he said last night, it's about doing the right thing regardless. When people say, why are you doing it? Because we are. And if you don't like it, we're going to do it anyway. How do you inculcate that?
So, Richard, you know, Larry Fink has now sort of doubled down on the BlackRock commitment to ESG, and he's insisting that companies show a plan or that BlackRock's not going to invest in you. That's a big hammer. The other hammer is, you and I have talked about this, the pyramid of authority has been flipped upside down. You know, the employees who are on this part are demanding, and so are the consumers, a activist role by business. And they'll give you trust, and they'll also give you their employment, and they'll buy, you know, they're belief-driven buyers, but they'll only do it if a company stands up and doesn't just let all of this pass by.
Richard, we may not be up a mountain, but we've still had a good discussion, and I'm grateful that you've taken the time. I'll maybe see you in Singapore in May, if not before, when we're at WEF. Thank you, sir. Keep well.
Thank you.